It may not seem like it to some of you, but Volvo's XC90 has been around for a really long time. It was released in 2002, and that means it's actually about 13 years old, even though it's aged fairly well. For 2016, we have an all-new Volvo XC90, however, and this is completely different. The new XC90 is built on an entirely different platform than every other Volvo currently on sale around the world. This is Volvo's new SPA platform, and it brings with it Volvo's new philosophy when it comes to designing vehicles. And we have Volvo's first production hybrid. It's a plug-in hybrid. It's available in the T8 model coming in October. Under this hood, you won't find Volvo's 5-cylinder or 6-cylinder engines, and you won't find a V8, even though that's what you'll find in some of the competition. Instead, we just have a 2-liter direct injection, turbocharged and supercharged engine. If you want more than the 316 horsepower that this model gets, they will add a hybrid drivetrain. They don't remove the turbo, they don't remove the supercharger, so you get a turbocharged, supercharged plug-in hybrid. That will give you 400 horsepower and about 475 pound-feet of torque. Out back, you'll notice that the traditional Volvo style is still with us. We have these somewhat exaggerated hips, but they are a lot smaller than the last generation. They're also not quite as horizontal. You'll notice right here, they do shoulder down a little bit more dramatically. Because this is still a 3-row crossover, you will find a slightly more vertical rear glass than you'll find in something like a Lexus RX or those other 2-row crossovers out there. You'll also find a relatively vertical rear end, helping improve that cargo practicality. As you'd expect with any modern redesign, the size is up this year versus last year. The biggest difference, however, really is the wheelbase. That's about 5 inches larger than last year's. They did that partially by making the whole vehicle a little bit longer than last year, but also by pushing that front wheel a little bit further to the front. That means that the XC90 is now a little bit larger than the recently redesigned BMW X5. It does still come in a few inches shorter than the Mercedes-Benz GL or the Audi Q7, however. As you'd expect from Volvo, front seat comfort is excellent. The seat now contorts in a number of ways that we didn't get in the past. So we have optional adjustable side bolsters, an optional thigh extender, 4-way lumbar support as well. Second row comfort is excellent in the XC90, but I'm going to put this one step below the QX60, which does have really comfortable second row seats. We do get reclining seat backs in this generation, and the seat bottom cushion actually slides a little further forward when you recline the seat to make it a little bit more comfortable. The recline mechanism is in a very good place as well. Again, keeping in mind we are in the upper end trims, we do have the optional Bowers & Wilkins sound system with these metal speaker grates right down there on the door. We also have some additional speakers on the dashboard. It's a very attractive look. We have more stitched leather going on right here on the door, some open pore wood trim, quite a lot of open pore wood trim actually. As you'd expect in a vehicle in this price category, when you go down lower towards those little storage cubbies down there on the bottom of the door, even those areas are all soft touch plastics as well. Moving on over to the dashboard, you'll notice that we have an awful lot of stitched leather going on. Again, those Bowers & Wilkins speakers right up there up top. This whole face is all stitched leather as well. The biggest thing you'll notice about this interior, obviously, is this very large touchscreen infotainment and navigation system. It is standard on all XC90 models. Below that, we do have some physical buttons in the system. We have a volume knob, play, pause, track forward, backward. We also have the button to release that glove compartment right over there, hazard lights, defog, and defrost. Over on the driver's side, we now have Volvo's latest full LCD instrument cluster. This is actually quite unique in this segment because the only other vehicle I can think of that uses this kind of LCD really is the Range Rover line. One thing you'll notice in the back is that the quality doesn't decline. We get the same stitched leather on the top of the dashboard, stitched leather armrests, soft touch plastics all the way around, a large portion of wood trim, and even available rear sunshades. Keep in mind we are in the top end trim. Out on the road, the first thing you'll notice about the XC90 is how much oomph you could actually get out of a 2-liter turbocharged and supercharged engine. Of course, this really isn't that new because Mercedes does get an awful lot of oomph out of their AMG engine in the CLA 45. However, the CLA 45's power comes on very differently than this 2-liter turbocharged and supercharged engine because of the supercharger. The supercharger really fills out the low-end torque down around 1,000 to 3,500 RPM or so. That means that this engine has a torque curve that's actually quite similar to BMW's 3-liter inline-6 turbocharged engine or Volvo's own 3-liter inline-6 turbocharged engine. The next thing obviously you'll notice is that this is a 4-cylinder engine, so it does not have the same sound that we get out of the V6 entries or the inline-6 entries or even the 8-cylinder entries with which this actually does manage to compete. Because this is right about the same speed 0 to 60 as a Mercedes-Benz GL 450. This is actually a little bit faster 0 to 60 than the last BMW X5 xDrive 35i that I tested. That's really a mouthful there. But the key thing to know there is it's all down to the torque that we get really low in the RPM band in this engine that really helps out the acceleration. There are a few benefits to the 4-cylinder engine. Some are obvious and some are not. On the obvious list, obviously we get better fuel economy. We actually get 1 mile per gallon better fuel economy than the X5, about 3 miles per gallon better than the GL450. We also get a drivetrain that's a little bit smoother when it starts stopping than the 8-cylinder or 6-cylinder engines out there. If you take a look at BMWs with the 6-cylinder engine or the 8-cylinder engine, when they turn the engine off and when they start it, you get an awful lot of body movement in the vehicle. Because this engine is so small, as well as the fact that it's transversely mounted up front, we don't get that much body motion when the engine starts and stops itself. In addition, we also get a weight reduction in the vehicle. Volvo tells us that the weight reduction is right around 300 pounds overall for this vehicle versus the last generation Volvo XC90 with the 3.2-liter inline-6 engine. However, a large portion of that weight loss is actually down to the engine. That means we get less weight up front especially. When you combine less weight up front with a new double wishbone suspension, we have handling that feels very polished and very, very good. The XC90, especially in the version we're driving here with the 275 with tires all the way around, certainly outhandles the Infiniti QX60. Admittedly, that is something of a low bar, but it also outhandles Acura's MDX, and the MDX has always been a good value alternative to the X5. The X5 handles very well, but I don't think it will actually pull any more horizontal Gs out on your favorite winding mountain road than this XC90. It will, however, feel better. The X5 does get better steering feel. We also get that rear-wheel drive dynamic, that rear-wheel bias, and that rear-wheel drive dynamic is obviously not present in the XC90. Unlike some air suspensions out there like my own Jaguar Super V8, this air suspension doesn't really feel floaty-boaty out on the road. I was actually quite impressed by it. I was a little bit surprised because I hadn't expected that level of performance. Now, it doesn't feel quite as buttoned down, quite as polished as you'll find in the BMW X5, or actually even the regular steel spring XC90, but you give up very, very little for that adjustability. The other thing that's interesting about the XC90, of course, is that all models sold in the US will be all-wheel drive at the moment. So there's no two-wheel drive version of this vehicle. That separates this, again, a little bit from the Infiniti and the Acura, which do have two-wheel drive trims. That means that when you're test driving one of these at the dealer lot, they're all going to feel the same. They're all going to feel a little bit closer to those rear-wheel drive competitors in the segment. Volvo has also upped their safety game in this generation of the XC90, so we get some expanded systems that you don't find in the rest of the competition. We get Volvo City Safety System, obviously, which is right up here behind the rearview mirror, but in an interesting twist, this module also contains the radar adaptive cruise control sensor and the radar sensor for those pre-collision warning systems. So it's no longer up there in the front of the vehicle. That could help reduce collision costs. That means that all models from the factory will do pedestrian detection and cyclist detection. They'll also now interact with other vehicles in an intersection. So if you're in an intersection, you're turning left, someone's coming on, it will attempt to stop you in that situation as well. Our model has the optional radar cruise control software added on top of that, along with the lane keeping assist, the blind spot monitoring system, etc., and now an autonomous driving system under 31 miles an hour. This is really quite unique in the market. BMW implied that they were going to bring one to the market with their new X5, but I haven't seen it available in the United States just yet. So if you're going under 31 miles an hour in heavy stop-and-go traffic, this will actually deliberately steer you to keep you in the lane and will also do the pedals for you. The XC90 is a compelling crossover in this segment. I would rather have this than the MDX or the QX60. It feels much more premium on the inside. It feels much more European out on the road. It definitely handles better than most versions of the MDX or the QX60. And that's even taking into consideration the all-wheel drive super handling system that we get over there in the Acura. A lot of it comes down to curb weight and the extraordinarily wide tires that we get on this model. We have 275 40R21s on the model we've been testing. These are the widest tires Volvo has ever put on any passenger vehicle, and they're definitely wider than what you'll find in the MDX. That really compensates for that torque vectoring rear axle. Even though the XC90 seems a little bit spendy, it actually ends up being a decent value when you compare it to most of the entries in this segment. Obviously, the MDX and the QX60 will be a little bit less expensive, but neither of those vehicles has the performance that we get out of the XC90 or the luxury features we get even in the base model. Where this really shines is when you compare this with the other European entries. BMW's X5 starts at $53,900, which is a decent amount more expensive than the base model. We actually get a little bit more feature content in the Volvo than we get in the base X5, and we actually get better performance as well. This goes 0 to 60 about a half second faster. The Mercedes-Benz GL is fairly expensive at $63,600. The performance is roughly equal to this model. Audi's Q7 does start a little bit less, but I expect the new 2016 Q7 to cost about $5,000 more. So when can you see an XC90? Well, dealers should have them on the lots right now for test drives. If you ordered a first edition model, you should be able to get your hands on it in June. If you have ordered a T6 that's not the first edition, you should be able to get yours around July, depending on where you are in the United States. And the R-Design and T8 models should be available in the US by October. Thanks for taking the time to check out this video. Again, I'm Alex Dykes with thetruthaboutcars.com. Go ahead and click the subscribe banner at the top of your screen and you'll be updated on all of our latest videos. You can also find us over at thetruthaboutcars.com for the latest news, reviews, and more. You can also find us over at facebook.com. I'll see you next week.